Welcome back, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Terrible Towel Tuesday. I am your host, SimFBallCritic, and let's get right into it, guys. Basically this show is just going to be, a brief show. It's not going to be that long, but I'm basically just going to give my quick recap on the 2016 season. All right, and what I'm actually doing is I'm doing a lot of this just off of memory. I like to do that from time to time, guys, because thoughts are organic when they're not really written out. So I like to do that from time to time. I'm going to give a quick recap and basically just do, a low-level recap, if you will. And what I mean by that is just, hit on some specific things but not really go into depth. Just give a broad overview of it. And I'll talk a little bit about the free agents that we have. And then, on the next show, which I may bring back next week, I'll start talking about what we should or should not do with certain players. All right, so let's address a couple things real quick before we go into the recap. Sammy Coates, hearing that he had surgery on his fingers, or actually getting surgery done today. So, in fact, that could have been part of the reason why he was still struggling as a receiver. So we'll talk a little more about that going into next season. On the next show, we'll talk about, what I think we should do with him. Because I'm seeing some people saying that he needs to be cut and kind of forgetting the talent that he did show at one time. So, again, rash decisions. Couple other things, guys. Ben Roethlisberger, we don't know more yet. I still think, his thoughts may have just been more emotional after the game, but I'll go into that as well on the next show. And then Antonio Brown, I'm still seeing some speculation on whether or not the Steelers should think about trading Antonio Brown and what that would mean to the Steelers. So I'll definitely get into that stuff as well on the next show. So the quick recap, guys. 2016, for the most part, was a success. And let me explain to you why. I think coming into the season, considering that we were going to have a young defense, thinking back all the way back to training camp, we didn't really know what was going to happen. We didn't know who would be the starter. We didn't know how many of the young guys would start. We knew we were going to be without Martavis Bryant, which is a huge weapon on offense. We knew we would be without a Le'Veon Bell for the first 3 games or so, possibly 4 games. We knew all of that coming in, right? So we already had questions on who would be the second receiver to step up opposite Antonio Brown. Again, on defense, we wanted to know who was going to be the hero or the solid piece in the defense that would sustain, a solid secondary. Was it going to be a Sinquez Golson, which we found very early that wasn't going to happen. Very disappointing moment there. So then you're thinking, well, man, Artie Burns might get an opportunity to start. During training camp, Artie Burns has a minor injury. He didn't start playing until the last preseason game. You probably thought that Sean Davis would get the start, given the fact of what Cornell Lake actually said about him early on. I think this guy could start at safety in our defense right away. You got the feeling that Sean Davis would get the start. And then you had to think, even with that, he's young. He may be a good player. He has a lot of upside, but he's young. He's a rookie. You didn't really know exactly what was going to happen with Javon Hargrave, even though I thought he was going to have an opportunity to play. But he ends up getting the starting role. So all in all, guys, by the end of training camp, going into the season, you're looking at 2 defensive starters in most cases. Even though we knew Robert Golden was going to get the nod, you thought that Sean Davis would take that over. Wasn't sure what was going to happen with Artie Burns. But let's just face it, after week 1, you get the win against the Redskins. They look pretty good without Le'Veon Bell, so you're thinking, wow, the Steelers offense is picking up where they left off. They're rolling. Antonio Brown and Ben are connecting. D'Angelo Williams looking amazing. Splitting defenders, making 2 guys miss on the way into the end zone. The defense is, they're doing okay. They're giving up some yards, but again, you're still thinking they're young. So through the first 3 games, D'Angelo Williams is leading the lead in rushing. You're thinking, okay, this team may do something. Now, most of us Steelers fans who really analyzed the game, we were looking at the defense. The defense was still a little shaky, giving up a lot of yardage. Coming off of a season last year where we ranked very low against the pass, you started seeing some of those same trends. All right, but the Steelers ended up being 3-1, I believe, before we faced Philly, and you're thinking, okay, we're doing pretty well. We're gonna get Le'Veon Bell back. When you face Philly, or I can't remember if we were 3-0, or I think we were both 3-0 when we faced them, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, when you face Philly, you start seeing the doubt. because you started seeing the things that expose the Steelers defense. The screen game, the quick passes, the run game from time to time was starting to expose the Steelers. A couple of injuries start creeping in and things like that. You were losing guys relatively early, like a week or two after that. Marcus Wheaton goes down. He never really recovers. Eli Rogers goes down, and it took him a while to get back in the fold. So you're starting to see a team that's kind of decimated at the wrong time in certain positions. The wide receiver position and defensively. Ryan Shazier went down for a couple games. So you're starting to see a lot of, I don't know moments, right? So then you go through that stretch when the Steelers go on a 4-game skid, right? And it wasn't so much that they lost. Of course, we don't like to see our team lose. It wasn't so much that they lost 4 in a row. It was how it was happening. You look at a Miami game, how Miami just runs completely rampant on the Steelers, giving up a 200-yard rusher. So now you're thinking, wow, is our run game going to be able to sustain this year? We know the pass game is suspect, but the defense is all over the place. Ranked very low in rankings, as far as total defense. Wasn't looking good for us. So I think most of us looked at this team and said, hey, defensively, we're not there yet. At this point, we got 3 starters, ended up being 3 starters on defense as rookies for the remainder of the season. William Gay kind of loses his position later in the season. He's just not really getting it done the way we expected him to. We started sliding him inside to the slot, and, it was serviceable, but didn't do the best job. Let's be honest. William Gay didn't really do the best job this season. He's an older guy. He could be reaching that point. Much like a Ike Taylor, where it's just to the point where you're just not what you used to be. Very understandable. Again, that should have been a Senquez Golson in that spot in the slot, and we could have potentially been looking at Artie Burns, Ross Cockrell, and a Senquez Golson, cornerback set with obviously Sean Davis and Mike Mitchell. But a lot of different things happen, man. Again, speaking of Sean Davis, Robert Golden loses his job. He's just not what we thought he could be. You look at the Philly game, you look at the Miami game, and you're seeing guys take bad angles. Jarvis Jones doesn't step up. He didn't really make a great claim for himself in this season. So a lot of things start looking bleak. So as a fan, we're looking at it like, this is not a Super Bowl team. This is not a team that's going to go far in the playoffs if they get to the playoffs. We're looking at them as a team that's fighting to make the playoffs, to win the division. And the only thing that saved us was the fact that our division wasn't playing well. There were a time where the Baltimore Ravens weren't playing well. Cleveland obviously wasn't playing well. Cincinnati wasn't playing well. So we went from being a team with high expectations to a team that's, if we get to the playoffs. Let's be honest. Let's be real, because I think the winning started creeping in people's mind and we got blind. I say we because we're all still a nation, but I didn't. Y'all remember, I've been saying this all season. I don't trust the defense. But I think a lot of the fans, we got blinded at the wins. We went on that incredible win streak, got into the playoffs, we finally got over the hump with the Ravens. You're finally able to beat them after losing to them in Baltimore, which, again, let's go back to that game. The way we lost that game just didn't feel comfortable. The defense giving up a big play, the 95-yard touchdown to Mike Wallace. Again, Artie Burns a little bit late. Again, he's a rookie. Things like that are going to happen. Mike Mitchell takes a terrible angle. And Mike Wallace shows that he still has speed, and he goes 95 yards for a touchdown. We give up a block punt. It doesn't look like a complete team. All season, the Steelers are not doing that well in, speaking of special teams, we're not getting good returns on punt returns or kick returns. We're not doing the best job on kick coverage. They're just not looking like a complete team if you really analyze how they play. So you get later on into the season, week 11, I believe is when it started. They go on this incredible run. They're looking like a force again. But keep in mind, the defense is still looking suspect. Let's think about that. Even though, we started getting pressure and things like that, started creating more turnovers, we were still giving up big plays or big conversions at the wrong time, particularly 3rd and long and even 4th down situations. I think back to when we played Cleveland. I want to say it was the first game we played Cleveland, in Cleveland. Look at how many times they went for it on 4th down and got it. That game at one point was 17-9. And then we edged it out late. But that game was much closer than the scoreboard showed, at the end of the game. So I just didn't feel comfortable, man. I felt like quarterbacks that weren't that great of quarterbacks were doing too much. Even when we played them again, RG3 is out there able to pass. I believe he passed for over 300 yards. It's just the theme of our season was inconsistency. Our offense wasn't always consistent. When they were hot, they were hot. When they were not, they were not. Pretty plain and simple. There was too many times that the offense stalled out in the red zone. Let's talk about that. Red zone efficiency was way down this year. The 2-point conversions, converting them, was way down this year. A lot of times, man, when we were off, when we had games that they were on. Kansas City game, in the regular season, we were clicking. We looked pretty good again against the Redskins. A game like, what other game comes to mind that we looked pretty good? The Dallas game. Offensively, we looked good in that game. We performed very well. We put up 30 points on the Cowboys, but we gave up 35. Again, that was the point where Jarvis Jones lost his job because they showed when they re-broke it down. And shout outs to SteelersDepot.com. When they illustrated what happened, Jarvis Jones losing containment a lot in that game. He's part of the reason why we lost, but not the full reason. And then, of course, you're losing guys like Cam Hayward. That didn't help with run defense. And, just a lot of different things, man. A lot of key guys got injured for spurts or either got injured for the duration. You get Darius Green back, and he shows up for a couple games. We had a great performance against the Colts. Mind you, it was against a Andrew Luck-less Colts. But we had a great performance against them offensively. Big Ben and Antonio Brown were unstoppable against Vontae Davis. Le'Veon Bell did some great things in that game. But again, defensively, we still let them hang around from time to time. We never showed, or rarely showed consistency by both units. It was rare that we did that. The Kansas City game was a game where you could say, okay, offense and defense was on their game. But rarely were we both clicking at the same time. And that's really how the season went, man. The theme of the season was inconsistent play from all three phases. Offense, defense, special teams. And that's why the Steelers, I would probably say that it's the reason why we're not playing in the Super Bowl this coming weekend, because we got there off of talent, and sometimes talent alone doesn't do it. Sometimes you have to be consistent. And going up against Brady and the boys, they exposed us. They beat us in the zone very badly. In times when we switched to man in that game, they beat us badly. Just undisciplined play on the defensive side of the ball. And there were times that the offense just couldn't get us over the hump. You look at a game like the playoff game against Kansas City. Didn't really score any points in that game. What was it, 18-16? Offense stalling out, man. Like the red zone ineffectiveness. Just not efficient enough. So, to wrap it up, man, put a bow on this season. Steelers showed flashes of what they could be. But, unfortunately, the inconsistencies reared its ugly head too many times. The inconsistencies and the lack of discipline on defense and the inconsistencies of the offense, particularly in the red zone, just showed up. And also, let me say this. Ben Roethlisberger became a little bit of a turnover machine a little bit this season. I can't remember his exact numbers, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Ben threw about 15 or 16 interceptions, somewhere around that range. Not good. It's not good. We can't have that. So that's how I would wrap up the season, man. Just inconsistent. And again, let me show you the biggest areas, and then we'll wrap this video up. Defensively, very inconsistent. And, I don't know if it was lack of talent or just youth, lack of communication or what have you. A guy like Mike Mitchell, I like Mike Mitchell for what he brings to the table, but I also don't necessarily like his play because of what he brings to the table. Meaning, what he's going to bring is a hard hitter, a guy that's going to help in the run, a guy that's going to, lay a shot on somebody after they catch the ball, but key words, after they catch the ball. Mike Mitchell is not a cover safety. He's not a cover safety. Very rarely is he there in time enough to bat down the ball or intercept the ball. He usually rotates a little late, makes his decision a half second late, and sometimes he's just too late to get there. Not really a cover guy. All right? Artie Burns is coming along. Ross Cockrell is coming along. I'm a little on the fence with Ross Cockrell. I like him, but I'm not sure. He'll have to really show me more in another season for me to be confident. That could be an opportunity for someone else there. We'll see. I like Sean Davis. Really love what Sean Davis has to offer. And again, man, I think without having that nickel guy, because remember, Sean Davis had to play nickel sometimes. Robert Golden didn't really produce anything for us. So defense, again, lack of consistency, lack of discipline, and it could have been some play calling there as well. I don't know. I still feel like a lot of it was just execution. I definitely think we need to make some changes on the defense as far as how they do things, scheme-wise. But I still believe that most of what we saw this season was individual mistakes or lack of communication. Again, we get on the offensive side, and even though, like I said, we got it going late, and I almost forgot this, pressure. Took us too long to develop pressure. It started coming along later. Maybe Bud Dupree definitely did help us out. There's no maybe about that. He definitely helped us out. But you just can't have a James Harrison at 38 years old being one of your premier pass rushers. It came on late, and pressure helped us, helped the back end, helped with turnovers and such. But early on in the season, we were not winning that battle. So I have to say lack of pass rush, inconsistent pass rush, which we weren't getting any against New England. And again, like I said, man, in that game, all of that inconsistency showed up. So that's really what hurt us defensively. The run defense was pretty good this year, even though we gave up the 200-yard rusher. We kind of bottled that back down, put a cap on that later on in the season, and we got back to where we needed to be. And even the total defense got back to where it needed to be. But anyway, let's move on to the next. Offensively, again, I think inconsistent play by secondary receivers, those not named Antonio Brown. We got great contributions from Eli Rogers, Kobe Hamilton at times, even Sammy Coates at times. Jesse James, like what Jesse James showed us at times. Ladarius Green when he was able to play. But it wasn't consistent enough. And again, that's part of the reason why we weren't as effective. And the biggest component would have to be red zone efficiency. Other than that, offensive line played very well this year. Great. The run game, we did a good job in the run game, even though it was slow early. For the most part, even when you look at the games outside of when Le'Veon Bell was playing, when D'Angelo Williams was holding everything down, he was a leading rusher for the first 2-3 games. So the offensive line played very well this season. But we have to shore up those areas, those spots that I mentioned, man, if we're going to do anything next season. And, a whole lot of factors are going to go into that. Like I said, next week, I'll get into the free agents. Just real quickly, guys, I'll let you know who they are. We all know this. Unrestricted free agents: Le'Veon Bell, Lawrence Simmons, Jarvis Jones, D'Angelo Williams, James Harrison, Marcus Wheaton, Landry Jones, Shamarko Thomas, Greg Warren, David Johnson, Ricardo Matthews, Cody Wallace, and Steven Johnson. All right, restricted free agents will be Chris Hubbard and Ross Cockrell. And then exclusive rights free agents: Fitzgerald Toussaint, Rosie Nix, Chris Boswell, Alejandro Villanueva, Xavier Grimble, Anthony Chickalow, Kobe Hamilton, BJ Finney, Jordan Dangerfield, Cole Manhart, Valerian Izoki. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but he was a training camp guy, and Kevin Anderson, another training camp guy. Now, I do believe Kobe Hamilton is already re-signed, as well as I believe Rosie Nix is going to re-sign or has already re-signed, so you can kind of take those guys off of the table. But next week, guys, probably next week, I'm pretty sure I'll just come back next week. We're going to talk about all of these free agents and what I think the Steelers should do with these guys. Who should be there, who shouldn't be there, etc., etc. So I told you guys earlier that this was going to be a short video. I guess I told a little lie there. This went way longer than I expected. But anyway, man, when you're talking about the Steelers, times just fly. Well, that's it, guys. That's all I got. Y'all know the routine, man. Once the screaming face appears on the screen, go ahead and hit that to sub to the channel for more content. And like always, guys, I promise it will never hurt you to hit that like button. Alright, guys, until next time, let me know what you think. Peace.